Here's your market update for the Sunshine Coast for the end of May and the start of June. So what's happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen. Here we go. Okay, it's getting a little boring, I know, kind of boring and good for sellers, kind of boring and bad for buyers. But there's two sides to that story. I was watching one of those current affairs shows about a month ago, and this poor couple had been to 200 open houses, had spent money on building and pest inspections, and still not secured a property. I think that's pretty common in this market, but there was a little bit more to the story because they had a chance to secure a property in the middle of last year, 2020, and they were $10,000 off what the seller had wanted, and they said, no, we're not going to pay, that's not worth it. So whoever was advising them then it gave them the wrong advice. It's okay to overpay a little bit for a property. Now that same property came on the market almost 8 months later for $100,000 more. They made another bid on it, this time much higher than what the earlier bid was. They rejected it and they still missed out because now there was more competition. So I suppose the moral of all this is, even though the market seems really frustrating for a buyer, it's still okay to overpay a bit for a property or even buy a bit more than what you think, as long as you hang on to it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It doesn't matter. In fact, most properties that I've bought personally myself that I've hung on to look like I should have sold them after 5 years and take the loss and move on, but I didn't, thanks to my wife, Kim. We hung on to them, and then now 20, 30, 35 years later, it looks like we're geniuses, but all we did was hang on to property, and we've bought in great markets and we bought in depressed markets. So it really doesn't matter. You've just got to hang on to those properties as a buyer. So back to the market in general, now that rant is over. The market's gone through a few phases. When we first started getting in this frenetic market, a lot of property came on the market, a lot of it sold. Now we're kind of in phase 2 where we're starting to sell properties that have leases on them now because we've run out of properties that don't have leases on them. And what's slowly happening is we're getting less and less and less property to be able to sell, but the demand is still there from buyers. In fact, it's getting greater because our government just put out a first-time buyers incentive scheme, in other words, helping first-time buyers in different demographics get into property, which increased the number of buyers in the marketplace. When you have an inventory that's decreasing, it's going to put more pressure on properties on the market, which means, at least for the foreseeable future this year, the market's going to remain pretty darn good. Again, that's a guess, but it's an educated guess. On the rental side, kind of same story. We manage a lot of properties. We rarely have any come up for rent. If they do, they rent pretty much immediately. The only exception of that was one we had listed recently. The market showed about this, so we put it on the market here, but then the seller came back and said, no, I want this. It sat there for 30 days. So even in great markets, if you're a little bit over where the buyers or these prospective tenants think you should be, the market will respond as a group and nothing will happen. Now, we eventually got that property rented after 30 days, which in this market is an astronomical amount of time, but only when the owner of the property adjusted their rent down a little bit, and then bam, we got it rented within 1 or 2 days. So I think there's a real lesson there. So how much longer is this market going to keep going at this pace, or even close to this pace? And I get asked that all the time, and the truth is I don't know. I think through this year, I think in the next year, but I really don't know. But as a seller, you can't keep hedging your bets thinking it's going to keep going up, because at some point it goes down, but you don't know about it until the next day, which means you then miss that market. So if you're thinking of selling, now's always a great time. If you're thinking of buying, conversely, if you wait and it goes up, you've missed it. So you're better off buying now too. Now, if it does go down, it goes down from up here, doesn't come back to where we are today. So if you're a seller, yep, if you're thinking about selling, now is the time. If you're a buyer thinking about buying, yep, now is the time. If you're a landlord and you want to get your house rented, yep, now is the time. So that's it. We're done with the Market Watch for another month. Goodbye.